Yo, it's ODB, Lincoln Addict podcast here, and I'm continuing this series of eBay and/or general listing reviews for these 60 era Lincoln Continentals. So, if you haven't yet subscribed, please consider doing so. Leave a thumbs up, leave a comment. It does really help our channel. What we're going to look at today is a little bit of a contrast to what we've been looking at. We've looked at some really nice cars. We've looked at some that are pretty solid overall, and we've looked at some that are a little bit different, of course, the custom convertible, but we found that it was pretty much a solid car from what we could tell. What you're looking at here is a 1962 Lincoln Continental. Of course, it's a sedan. What you're going to see here is the current bid, $4,500. There is a bid in on it, and it does look like potentially there's no reserve here. I do believe this car has kind of popped up here on a couple times, so sometimes you'll kind of see that maybe the seller doesn't come through or what have you. But what I want to do here is kind of focus on the fact that this person does have a 756 rating, which is solid, and with this car, it's not what we've seen. So basically, I always click here to kind of make the photos larger, and from here, looks like, a normal sedan Lincoln, right? With further inspection, we're going to see some things, and the first thing my eye goes to here is the rear quarter panel. So I can tell here it's pretty eaten up. I can see here the paint doesn't look very nice, and it's going to kind of lead us to some other things. Of course, anyone that's selling a car, you're always going to want to have like that first photo, maybe your best photo, right? That's going to bring people in to actually even take a look at the ad. Of course, the next photo is going to be one of the coolest aspects of these cars. People love the suicide doors. You'll often hear people, as I've said on the podcast, Lincoln Addict podcast, refer to these cars as kind of, quote, their dream cars, right? So many people want one of these. What I'm looking at in here is you can see it's very dirty. This could potentially be rust. We'll look at the other photos, and you can see, someone took the time to wash the car, spray it off. But, on a car that's not going to be kind of a high-end type car, you'll see where they'll put the detailing items on the tires, but they aren't going to take the time to really clean every little aspect of these cars. And again, not knocking them, just kind of giving you some of the things to look for. So from there, for the most part, it's got the hubcaps, it's got the white wall tires, and really we just need to continue to look further. So here you're going to see dents and dings in the peak molding. I'm also looking at the hood. It doesn't look like it's all the way closed here. Here it does, so I would assume that it is all the way closed, but you can kind of see here the hood ornament is not kind of upright position there. But obviously, there's definitely dents and dings in these peak moldings. The paint here, you can kind of see that someone has come in and feathered some paint, whether it be spray paint or something to that effect. You can look at the bumpers compared to what we've seen in the very nice cars. These bumpers oftentimes can be cleaned up with steel wool, the quadruple zero, and some Brasso or good polish. So that's usually not my main concern in terms of how good or bad are the bumpers. I want to know or how good or bad the chrome is, so to speak, or the finish. But I kind of want to look to see, are these eaten up, are these rusted out, and things like that. A lot of times the bumpers may be in good condition. They can be re-chromed and whatnot. I'm also kind of looking in here, and based upon this car was just recently sprayed off. You can see the water. This basically is all black in here. You really can't see anything. Tires look good, and we just need to kind of investigate more. So, again, this rear quarter panel, when I talk about looking in the deck lid or the trunk, and you kind of look inside this panel, it's going to give you an opportunity to kind of look down in here. If you've watched shows like Gas Monkey Garage, or you've watched TV shows where people are going with cash to buy these cars, and they're buyers and sellers and things, they're always going to look at this kind of stuff on just any old car. But from the perspective of this car, you can see, this is totally eaten up. And this is a sign that there is rust in this car, okay? Cars can be fixed, and it really goes down to what your budget is and how much you plan to spend on these cars or on a car or whatever you end up purchasing, because these cars can be huge money pits, right? Oftentimes, I've seen cars that look even nicer than this so far, and they become parts cars, literally. Now, the rear bumper end, you can see here, it does look like it's got some rust on it. Again, these are things that can be fixed, but it's going to be more costly when you start sending this in to someone like Advanced Plating in Tennessee. Rear bumper, you can't really see much here. I do tend to look here. I want to see how bad this decklet is. I did scan through the photos briefly earlier today on my phone, so we'll definitely get into it. I do like to see, a lot of times these grills are really, they're seated very nicely against the body. And oftentimes, this stuff has never been taken apart, and that's perfectly okay. But, I'm looking in here to see, is there anything that kind of gives me indication the car's been repainted? We can obviously see the paint is very, very faded, maybe sat outside a very long time. On these rectangles, they're kind of the tell to easily identify from the front end that it's a 62. That's the difference. I've talked about the smaller squares in 63. Here are the larger, what I call rectangles, and you can kind of see some of these are not right, whether that was damage or, just age of sitting outside. This is pot metal, so it does tend to pit really bad. These guys right here above the headlights, these often can be cleaned up, and that's nothing, too much to worry about. They can be replated or cleaned up. Back here, you kind of see a photo from, the angle looking down. I tend to want to see a photo, kneel down. If you're taking a photo here, I want to kind of see the bottom of the bumper and things like that. Or, of course, they could just include more photos. So, we haven't gotten to them all, so don't want to hit them on that. But you can see in here, heavy rust. I mean, this is stuff that can't really just easily be cleaned up. So you're going to have a cost in getting a lot of this stuff redone. You can see also down here, which is typical. This kind of tells me more than likely this car sat out a long time. Now, it does say expired in 62, and it is worth noting, generally I do start down here, and I think we should just go to it briefly because this gives us that quick overview where I scanned earlier. And it is worth noting, relisting, as I had mentioned, due to non-payment, purchased from an estate. Family is attempting to obtain the title, but selling with no title. The family contacted me, yada, yada, yada. Goes on to say that it was owned by a pastor. A restoration was started years ago. $4,000 was spent on the seats, door panels, blah, blah, blah. The body has poor body work, Bondo. So they're giving a heads up. Now, sometimes you're going to have someone that's going to come along that's going to go, oh, man, this is my dream car. This is what I want to get. It's a good price. I can afford it, $4 or $5,000. Just know a car like this, so far what I've seen, you could end up dumping far more into it than it would cost you to go maybe buy a $25,000 or $30,000 sedan. Let's just say this car sells at $5,000. We saw one that I did a review on from Bring a Trailer that sold for $36,000. So you go, okay, the difference between 36 and change and 5 is $30,000 or so. I mean, oftentimes you can get a really nice car that's not even 36,000, maybe 15 or 20 grand, and you would have far less in it than so far what I'm seeing. So since I clicked out of the photos earlier, these are kind of getting hosed up a little bit. So what we'll do is close this, and we'll just go back in here. So we left off here. Let's see if we can get this to work. We'll just click on them individually. All right. So they jump from the body to the interior. You can see the seats had been redone, so that's what made me think of it. You can see in here you're going to end up, if you end up buying a car like this, you've got cracks in the dash indicating that it's been sitting outside. The seat color isn't necessarily going to maybe be what you're looking for, so then you're end up going to have to get the seats redone. I do tend to look in here and look at the gas pedal. I mentioned this, I think, in another video. It's a little bit easier from the left side, the driver's side, so to speak, but you can often see on the gas pedal like how is the gas pedal really worn? If a car hasn't been driven that much with a shoe or a boot there, it's going to be a pretty nice looking gas pedal. If it's been really, really ran in the ground and someone's trying to sell it, as like it's got 5,000 miles, it, believe it or not, will kind of be a little bit of a tell in terms of how much the car has been used. Underneath the hood, looks pretty good under here. You can see it does have the newer insulation, surprisingly. I immediately look here. You guys have heard me talk about the 2-port versus the 3-port the fuel pump. And this one I can immediately tell you is the junk one, the 2-port. And you can see from those two bolts there. Now, what I wanted to do is jump back. So we I was here, and then really where I like to go is, okay, can we go in the trunk, right? This deck lid is bad, all right? One, you can see right here, it is all rusted, and all of these dark lines under here it's rust, okay? These deck lids tend to rust, even on super nice cars. My understanding, as I mentioned before, it has to do with the adhesive that was used, and it kind of holds moisture. Whether that's actually it or not, I can tell you, even on nice cars, you'll end up getting holes on the outside of these deck lids, and it has to be repaired by a good body shop. They can cut those rust holes out. But this one here is 100% has to be replaced. And if you're looking at just the deck lid, you will sometimes spend $3,000 to $4,000 if you can find one for the year just for this deck lid. Seriously, it's insane. Now, there is a guy that's making fiberglass replacements, and they're really nice. He put a lot of research and development into them, and everyone that I know that's gotten one for, I think, the price of $2,500 to $2,500 up, depending on sedan or convertible, they love them. But just know that this right here, oftentimes I tell people, they'll get a car for $3,000-$4,000. They're like, oh, I need a deck lid. I'm like, well, be prepared to spend more just on the deck lid than on the actual car. Looking in the back here, again, I mean, this is very, 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 I don't know the best word, gruesome. Not nailing, this, the seller, because, granted, they could have acquired it. They want to get it out of their yard. They want to move it, whatever. But, I mean, this is a car that you really have to say to yourself, are you just going to get it as a beater car if you can get it running and driving and it's cruising down the street? Or are you going to do a full restoration and maybe spend $100,000-$200,000? I mean, it easily could go to that, and we'll look at more photos here in just a minute. You can see these sill items in here and whatnot. They look really, really good. The seats, again, aren't that bad, but if they're not your favorite color, you're going to end up having money invested in redoing those. So let's go back up here. Look at the engine bay. Now, a couple things I notice here. Again, it's got the 2-port fuel pump. It is not an AC factory car because the air conditioning compressor would be here. It's got the factory master cylinder. So it's got the single, which again is kind of a death trap. You want to upgrade that. And you can see there's not a lot going on in here. It's a lot of crustiness, and that's normally okay. All this stuff can be blown apart. I did it in my 64, took the engine and transmission out, had the whole engine bay repainted, everything powder coated and cleaned up and stuff. It just takes a lot of time, and it does take some money. You can see in here there's no fan shroud. You could argue, some people will talk about, well, you don't need a fan shroud and this and that, but really you do want a fan shroud on your car. And these cars, these 430s, do tend to get very hot. I've talked about that in the past, where there's not a lot of area for the heat to escape. Plus, the headers just get super hot. If you've ever wondered, if you've owned one of these cars, get a digital thermostat or a digital little gun and shoot it. Have someone in the car with their foot on the brake, or turn it off when you first get home, from cruising, and fire it, here on the intake and then fire it down here on the headers, and you'll see these engines get super hot. Now, most engines do, right? Don't get me wrong, but it is best to have a nice radiator that's got good flow and to have a fan shroud, in my opinion. All right, so I'm going to close this down here. All right, let's look at this angle. Again, you can see here there's no air conditioning compressor. The something a little wonky is going on here. You know, the where the lines are coming in. They've actually kind of bypassed. So what I'm guessing is they have this is basically an electric fuel pump, and that's what they're using. So that's telling you inside the tank. Normally the sending unit, or in this case, is probably just shot. Again, not factory stuff. This is where I want to spend a couple minutes, and then we'll wrap this one up. Maybe not too long, but inside the trunk, just bad. I mean, you can see right here when I talk about a nice car versus one like this, where it is just, really eaten up. You can't even see the weather stripping. I mean, this thing could have sat under a tree forever and had tons of leaves and it's grimy. All this stuff in here is going to have to be cut out and replaced. There's not much more to say this is pretty rough, okay? Let's go here underneath the car. Now, from this angle, this is important to have different photos. From this angle, if it was just a standard Lincoln, I'd say, hey, so far, no rust here. Obviously, exhaust needs to be redone, a little crunchy over here. But, let's look here, underneath the radiator. I always talk about looking here. This one's one of the worst I've seen, this cross member, so to speak. Imagine trying to take these nuts out, right, these nuts and bolts. I mean, they're probably just going to break off, okay? But this whole cross member up here, I mean, you'd have to go in and replace this. I had a chunk fixed on my 67, and it was underneath where the battery acid had leaked. But again, this is pretty damn rough right here. So that's stuff that you got to look at. Now, from the rear, this piece here is kind of like the frame. I mean, it's a unibody car, but this is the main structure piece here. I've cut one of these up before for a couch that I'm hopefully going to one day make happen for a 65 Lincoln. But it's pretty thick through here. When you get a Sawzall blade and you're trying to cut, straight from here to here. But when you look at this and you see how gone it is, I mean, there's just a lot of work in trying to repair all this. And you can just see how crunchy it is. The gas tank's probably never been dropped. It's obviously original. Leaf springs look a little bit wonky in here. That's just there's a lot going on here, and I don't want to beat a dead horse. Interior, not going to go through all of that. I mean, it looks pretty good overall. You can see here. I mean, this is a huge bad sign here. It's like, dude, this is rough. I mean, you don't have to be a car expert to know there's something going on underneath this paint. All right. Shout out to the Raddies, my good homies, my friends. I mean, this one I don't even know could get patched in the Raddies Club. I mean, this is pretty ratty. You can see here on the back, this is with the deck lid, and it looks it's rough. I mean, there's stuff going on, and the guy mentioned the Bondo. That's why I wanted to go back to that. Anytime you see these in this Lincoln car, or these Lincolns, the '60s Lincolns, you will know that this is an aftermarket AC. Not a bad thing. I've been in a couple cars that have aftermarket AC, the kind of under dash mount, and they work great. By all means, you could, let's say you bought a car that didn't have AC, you could put some vintage AC in it. I've seen it done, no big deal. And vintage AC, I mean the company Vintage Air. The other thing that I'm looking at here is, again, this guy has a Lincoln, okay? This is not the same Lincoln we were looking at. This car, I could tell here is a 66, 67. It's a convertible, and last year they made them was 67. But this guy knows his way around Lincolns, right? Obviously, he's got one. So this would be someone, if you were looking at this car, whether you want to restore it, that's up to you, or if you, for whatever reason, maybe you wanted it 4 parts, right? Maybe there was something on it that you really wanted. This is the kind of guy, knowing he's a Lincoln guy, get on the phone with him and talk to him a little bit and, get the answers you're looking for. Now, I don't know everything about these cars. This body trim piece, when I looked at it earlier, I don't see a DSO. I don't know that I've seen that before. I don't know what's going on there. But we can't figure out the destination without that code there. So we don't know where it originally went to. Like, was it a LA car? Was it, the Northeast or whatever? I assume the Northeast. But Without that, we don't have that little bit of insight. But again, this is a rough car, so you kind of know so far from the photos what you're getting. This, it has to be redone. The headliner, just kind of thinking through, and that's about it. If we go back here, underneath the doors are also rusty. P.S. The rear doors is very bad. It opens partially. Headlights, taillights, blinkers, blower motor, all working. Also included in the sale is the original color dealer 12-page brochure, which, those are $30-$40. The glass is in good condition and includes interior parts. So, in closing, okay, this is important. Someone may go, this car is pretty bad off. Why would they want to even sell it? You will have someone that, again, the budget calls for, hey, I want to restore a car. Father-son, father-daughter deal, whatever. And I've seen people take a car like this and make it happen. The other thing that I think of is the guy, Joe, Weld County Customs, who built that amazing car, and it sold for the record over $700,000. That custom car. Now, this is a far cry from that, but hear me out. He was in the look, or he was on the hunt for clear glass. He needed a piece or two, okay? Here's one cool thing about this car that you may not have thought of. This car has completely clear glass, okay? It's a feature, my understanding, for cars that had no AC, all right? So this car, we know, did not have air conditioning. Now, the front windshield, off the top of my head, I don't know that they ever made the front windshield totally clear. And that's something that even on trucks is something you can't always find and things like that. But like coming from the truck scene, the Suburbans and things like that from the late 80s and 90s, to get clear glass, you had to get like a county vehicle. You had to get the glass from it because you really couldn't find it. But you could have someone, from a parts perspective that goes, I'm building the custom car and I'm going to a crazy level with the detail and I want the clear glass. And this is one that sticks out to me, other than the windshield, of course, right here, which on newer vehicles we kind of call the factory tint line or the factory tint. This one has clear glass, so that's one cool thing. This could easily be something someone would maybe purchase and put out in front of their business. You've often seen State Farm, insurance companies, and things like that. They'll put an old panel van or something to that effect just to kind of draw some attention. Like, oh, there's an old car. How often do you see that in your town, right? Those type of things. I've seen people, have restaurants and they just want to have something out there. So there are people out there that potentially would buy this, and maybe it would be good. It would be a good write-off for them and make it happen. There's other people that are looking at it from a parts perspective. They're going to look at every inch of this to see, hey, are there enough parts to make some money? But me, personally, I would steer clear unless you fell into that category. Again, 62 Lincoln Continental. We know 62, the bumper changed vastly from the 61 model, the lower bumper, and then, of course, the grill is the tail with the longer rectangles. It's ODB. Please, if you can, check out Lincoln Addict Podcast. I'm going to jump over here to the other tab, and you can obviously go to lincolnaddict.podbean.com. You can Google Lincoln Addict Podcast, and you can also, on your iPhone, go to the pre-installed purple podcast icon. You can search Lincoln Addict, and it will pop up. The cool thing is, from the website or the app, you can go back and listen to all these episodes. And I think with episode maybe 22, I did fix, for whatever reason, they weren't batching to YouTube. So oftentimes you can pull up another browser window here and just stream it online through YouTube. So appreciate the support. Stay on the rise. Have a great weekend. We'll talk to you next time.